Is that a group of deplorables way in the back? Okay, I want to take you all back a year ago to November 8th of 2016. By the way, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of folks wanted me to talk tonight on the first anniversary of the high holy day of MAGA, right? I had to come here for a lot of reasons I think we'll go through in this short talk I'll give tonight. At 9:15 on the 8th of November, the Detroit Free Press called Michigan for Hillary Clinton. At that time, I'd had 100% certainty that we were going to win the presidency, but that was a little speed bump. We had very much thought that Michigan was in play, and our model showed that we were doing better than we thought. At 10:36, AP called Ohio for Donald J. Trump. At 10:50, AP called Florida for Donald Trump. At 11:11, they called North Carolina for Donald J. Trump. At 12:02 a.m. on the 9th, they called Iowa for Donald J. Trump. And at 12:15 a.m. on the 9th, the Detroit Free Press reversed their call and said they would have to reconsider. They took it back from Hillary Clinton. It was at that moment that those of us in a data room and up in the war room knew that Donald J. Trump was going to be president of the United States. At 1:35, Pennsylvania was called, and at 2:28 a.m. on the 9th, Wisconsin was called. The Associated Press called it for Donald J. Trump at 2:30. We had an arrangement with the Clinton campaign that Robbie Mook had sent over to Kellyanne Conway, that within 15 minutes of AP calling it, that that they would go up. If they hadn't heard from us, they would go up and give their victory speech, and that the reverse would hold with us. And so Donald J. Trump at the Hilton Hotel went up and gave that, I think, that very memorable victory speech. By the way, the Detroit Free Press at 5:31. You know I had to go here, guys, right? The opposition party, thank you. 5:31 on the 23rd of November, the Detroit Free Press called it for Donald J. Trump. I think it was officially certified a couple of days later, but thank you, Detroit Free Press. Let's go back in time. In August, 85 days before, Donald J. Trump, when I joined the campaign, I think it was August 13th or 14th. I think it was 12, 16 points down, basically double digits down in every battleground state, or every significant battleground state. I think it was 70 on the generic ballot. You got to be 90. 9 out of every 10 registered Republicans have to vote for you to be president of the United States. I think it was like at 70. Campaign didn't have a lot of cash, not a lot of organization. But what we had was, I thought, the finest candidate to run for the presidency since Ronald Reagan. And just like Ronald Reagan, he understood at a very deep level the problems of this country. He understood why Macomb County and certain areas of Michigan have gone from a global powerhouse in manufacturing to hollowed out. Donald Trump understood what globalization and the elites in this country and other countries had done to working men and women in the United States. And so all I told him, I said, look, it's very simple. We're just going to compare and contrast Hillary Clinton, who is the guardian or the standard bearer, the tribune of a corrupt and incompetent elite, with yourself, who's an agent of change. I know we would come to the unity dinner and a Trump rally would break out. We're going to get to build a wall here momentarily. I told candidate Trump at the time on that Saturday and then again on Sunday, the 13th and the 14th, he had 100% metaphysical certitude to win if he just stuck with the playbook. And that playbook was basically give people permission to vote for you as an agent of change. I said, Hillary Clinton stands for exactly the way things are. And folks in this country understand that the country is being destroyed economically, culturally, militarily. And things can't go on like this. Things have to change. People had voted for President Obama as an agent of change, and there were many people out there that just didn't believe that President Obama had delivered on that change. From the 12, 14, 16 points down, we broke the campaign to 3 pieces. Number 1 was to get to the first debate, which is about 7 weeks away, and to try to be within mid-double digits down. Our thinking was if we couldn't be that, it was going to be very tough to drive it home. On, I think it was Morning Joe, my favorite show. The geniuses on Morning Joe. It was on Morning Joe, had the woman from Bloomberg, who's the pollster out in Iowa, does all those great polls. She's, I think, one of the finest pollsters around. And they had us, I think, up inside the margin error. We had closed basically a 14 or 16-point gap in 7 weeks. Now, how did Donald Trump do that? He had just gotten very focused on what the message was of a handful of things. Number 1, stop mass illegal immigration and start to deal with legal immigration to get our sovereignty back. Number 2, bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And number 3, we have to bring an end to these pointless foreign wars. Within those 3 big headings, a lot of things came about. You know, Hillary Clinton was on the beach. She was in the Hamptons and other places where her party at Davos elites spending the summer, not campaigning. She was fundraising because they were raising money for the House and the Senate because they thought they were going to run the tables. If you read their books, they thought Trump would lose by 20 or 25 points, biggest landslide in history, and they would take the House and the Senate, the Supreme Court, it would be all over. They would break the back of the Republican Party. She came out, I think 10 days later after I was, and by the way, you know, when I was picked to be the CEO, all the geniuses in the media go, okay, Trump's going to lose by 30 points. He knows it, and he brought in this mad bomber and this guy is just going to do one suicide run after the other to destroy the enemies of Donald Trump in this massive kind of Gadamarung of vengeance, right? And all they saw was a very disciplined campaign that used very sophisticated data analysis to make sure we could put our candidate exactly where he had to be and exactly where all the geniuses around Hillary Clinton didn't send her, to Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Iowa. Hillary Clinton came out, and what'd she do? She gave a speech. I'm sitting in the war room with Andy Sarabian and the guy. Some of them are here tonight. Andy Sarabian, can you stand up? One of the guy ran the, where's Andy? They may have already thrown Andy out. I don't know. Andy was head of rapid response. We had all these TV sets, like 50 TV sets, and we're sitting there, and all the screen is, you know, Bannon white nationalist, Bannon white supremacist, Breitbart, you know, ethno-nationalism. And I just sat there with the team, and I said, if they're going to go to identity politics, they're going to lose, and they're going to lose badly. People in this country are worried about their children and their grandchildren. They're worried about where the factories went, who sent them there, and who made money off sending them there. They want to get focused on the problems in this country, not make up problems. And her journey into identity politics, I think, doomed her. And I thought doomed her from the very beginning. So we get down to, we close it, basically tied a couple of points up. And then we have, of course, the debates. And the first debate, we thought we won, maybe a draw. We got to the second debate. And before the second debate, they had the tape of Billy Bush, right? So, when the Billy Bush tape came out, we had the Saturday, and that was the defining moment, I think, of the campaign. And look, I'd never worked in a campaign in my life. I'd never been in a campaign office. I had never done anything political in my entire life outside of college. But I hadn't, at 60-some years old, I hadn't done anything. But I could tell, I can understand math. I can count, right? So I knew where the president was resonating. I knew that this message we had laid out in those 7 weeks were the things that Donald Trump had been talking about for 20 and 30 years. He understood the problems of the country. He understood how to go to these massive rallies and connect with people like he was having a personal conversation with them when we'd have, 15 or 20,000 people in these places. And as they went around as we went around, we were up in the penthouse in the residence around on Billy Bush. President Trump is a percentage player, right? And he always wants to know, what do you think the percentages are? What do you think the odds are? And people were going around 20%, 40%, et cetera. A couple of people said, hey, you got to drop out. You're going to lose by the biggest landslide in history. And it was, pretty grim, some recommendations what to do. And he came to me, and he said, what do you think? I go, 100%, metaphysical certitude, you're going to win. It's the one time of the campaign he lost his temper with me. He goes, knock it off. I don't want to hear your 100% today. And I go, no, it's 100%. I mean that. It's 100%. And instead of doing all these other things, you're thinking of doing 60 minutes, all this other stuff you're thinking of doing, what we should do is rent the Hilton Hotel down the street and have a rally tonight with a bunch of the deplorables and red ball caps and talk about what the issues are in this country, because the people don't care about locker room talk. They care about the fundamental destruction of the greatest country in the history of mankind. That meeting and the follow-on, and by the way, President Trump went down the elevator after a follow-on meeting and went out to the streets. There was like 10,000 people. The deplorables were there and just cheered him on. And it really rejuvenated him that the next day, we went to the second debate. I had thought of, in the interim, after I heard the tape, that I thought, since Donald Trump's words are going to be used against him, maybe we should have President Bill Clinton's actions used against him. And that's where we had the women. He's a sexual predator, right? He's a sexual predator. And have the women that he had abused, right, and attacked come to the debate and maybe confront him on national TV, right? And have the young woman, or she was in her 60s at the time, that 11 years old, that Hillary Clinton had represent the rapist that had raped her and broken her life. When you heard her story, something the mainstream media didn't want to go into much detail about because they're too busy on a loop all weekend playing the Billy Bush tape over and over and over again. So I thought it'd be a good time to give you all a taste of your own medicine. And we know from the books, and we know from what happened at that time, it rattled the Clintons. It rattled the Clintons to know that somebody was going to call them out and hold them accountable. And that was Donald J. Trump. I would like to remind the establishment of the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. right now, with all the great men and women that ran in the primary in 2016, do not think for a second there was anybody but Donald J. Trump that could have defeated the Clintons. After the last debate, we had a 3.5-week sprint to the finish. And here's a guy that's 70 years old that we're doing 5, 6, 7 massive rallies a day. You know how much it takes just to take out a 5-minute speech or to stand up here, the preparation and how much you get drained. This is a guy doing 5, 6, 7 rallies. I mean, starting at 7 in the morning with a rally at 7 or 8 in the morning, up at 5, and all day long on that plane. And a huge speech. These speeches are taking 30, 45 minutes. I mean, we were coming into hangars, and he was hitting it. I mean, to come back to Michigan. But I knew, and Jared knew, and Kellyanne knew, and Dave Bossie, everybody, as we looked at it, we could see the math coming back to us. And our strategy was that, and here was the daunting task. We had to win Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Iowa just to get to the table. You had to win those 4 just to get within striking distance of the finish, right? Then we had 2 plans, an A and a B plan. The A plan was Colorado, Nevada, New Hampshire, Maine 2. Got us right to 270. Plan B, because we could look at the demographics and we look at what was happening around places like Youngstown, Ohio, and Dubuque, Iowa. Plan B was, if we could see it coming back to us, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And we could feel it coming back to us. We could feel it coming back to us. No president could have put that. No candidate could have put that group of states together. And here's the reason. He speaks not just in a vernacular and connects to people. He talks to folks like an adult about the most important issues of the day. Because he's not a politician. It's the reason I wanted to come here tonight, is to have a partner's conversation with you all about exactly where we stand. The only time I ever doubted was that on Election Day, we finished in Michigan, right? I'm not even sure Hillary Clinton, I think she went to Detroit one time, I'm not even sure. I was so stunned. You know, this is what I love about Morning Joe. Every day on Morning Joe, they're saying Donald Trump's going to lose by 20, it's going to be a landslide, he's going to get crushed. Robbie Mook is a genius, Podesta's a genius, Hillary Clinton's the greatest, smartest person in humankind. Donald Trump's a barbarian, Donald Trump's a psychopath. This is the biggest collection of amateurs we've ever seen. They've never worked on a campaign. This is the island of misfit toys, right? And I'm sitting there, I've never worked on a campaign, but I can understand math, and I'm sitting there going, man, what am I missing? Or what are those guys missing? Because they're not going anywhere they should be, and they're going everywhere they shouldn't be. Thank you, brother. Your lips to God's ear. And talking about fake news, the early polls, the exit polls came out at about, I think, 5 or 6 o'clock. And we're running around down in this data room. We actually called the crack den because there was nothing on the floor of the thing. There was no heat, right? It was one day we set up a command post to kind of bring in all the election results. And when the early exit polls came out, we were, how do I say this politely? We were kind of tied in Ohio and kind of tied in Iowa, and we were getting crushed everywhere else. I mean, just blown out. And, you know, I looked at Jared, and he looked at me, and, you know, we called a couple of people, and they said, he said, corporate media does that, don't worry about it. And it's interesting. It's what happened to the Detroit Free Press, is that they had their model set up that they didn't take into account in the algorithm the turnout for Donald Trump in places like Macomb County and in places like rural Michigan. That's why in their model and in the models of all the ABC and CBS, the joint venture, the consortium that runs it, that they thought they were correct, and they were dead wrong, because their model was just based upon what had happened traditionally. And that night was not tradition. And that's why I think it behooves us to go back and think about how we won that and where we are today. You know, the very first thing I did on the very first day I took over as CEO is to start, I made a phone call to the RNC. I got Reince Priebus on the phone. I'd met Reince Priebus once in my life for 2 minutes. All I knew about Reince Priebus is that we lit him up every day on Breitbart. Reince is a very dear friend now, but I mean, he was a little taken back. No, but we had to do this. We called the Right to Life groups. We called the Tea Party groups. We called every group a national group. We talked to all the state coordinators. I mean, the state of Michigan was unbelievable what the Trump campaign did out here in conjunction with the RNC. What we did is put together a coalition, right? This coalition had both establishment people and it had Trump people. And that's how we won. And the coalition's got libertarians in it. It's got neocons in it. It's got populists in it. It has limited government conservatives in it. It's got, Wall Street fat cats in it. And it's got, economic nationalists in it. It's got traditional Trump voters. It's got the deplorables. It's got other folks too. We wouldn't have won any other way. Because the alternative is the Clinton apparatus and the progressive left of the Democratic Party. Now, we would not have won without that coalition. And I think it behooves us today to think about that. Let's talk about Virginia for a second. Ed Gillespie's a good man. He's much more of an establishment guy than Corey Stewart, who ran against him. But Corey Stewart lost in that primary, only by a couple thousand votes. And Ed Gillespie was the candidate. And I think it reflects positively on the Trump folks that tried to put their shoulder to the wheel and to try to push Virginia, a blue state, over the goal line. Remember, I'm a Virginian. In Virginia, I said from day one, we wouldn't come close to 2 or 3 points. We lost it by 5 with Donald Trump at the head of the ticket. And we spent more time in Virginia than I felt comfortable with. So Virginia is a blue state. Now, one of the things about the Gillespie campaign which it shows you is you can't fake the Trump agenda. You have to go all in. And this agenda is a winning agenda. Do not believe the opposition party. Do not believe the fake news and fake media. This agenda is what America needs now. It is what America needs to rebuild its future. And it's a winning ticket. Now, what do I mean by this agenda? We talk about economic nationalism. And what they're trying to do is smear the Trump deplorables. And that was Hillary Clinton's speech. She was smearing them as nativist and racist, right? And ethno-nationalist and white supremacist. Nothing could be further from the truth. You live here in this county. You know the hard-working, decent folks are here. Economic nationalism is what binds us together. It doesn't matter what your race is, or what your ethnicity is, or what your color is, or what your religion is, or what your gender is, or what your sexual preference is. You know what he cares about? You're a citizen of the United States of America. That's what he cares about. For too long, we've allowed the geniuses on Wall Street and Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. to dictate to the working men and women in this country what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. And we've had now over 40 years an ascended economy of technology in Silicon Valley, in Wall Street, in Hollywood, in the imperial capital of Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., 7 of the 9 counties that surround it are the richest counties in this country. For the first time since the invention of the silicon chip, Washington, D.C. those counties have a higher per capita income than Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley has created more wealth than any region in the world in human history. We have a permanent political class. What you watch on cable TV every night is pro wrestling, okay? That's not the way things roll. The congressman can understand that, right? We were talking beforehand. You're so blessed to have Congressman Mitchell, I got to tell you. You really are. I mean, even at 60 years old, he shows up and he understands it right away, right? The permanent political class is both parties. It's inextricably linked of their interests. It's a business model. The consultants, the lobbyists, the big corporatists, looking out for their interest. Well, who represents the interests of the working men and women of Macomb County? That is the message of Donald J. Trump, is the message of Ronald Reagan. The economic hate crimes, and that's what they've been, of these trade deals that ship, and this state knows better than anybody where those jobs went. When the automobile industry went overseas, right? Think of all the things that went with it. All the engineering firms and logistics firms and all the law firms and everything that supported that went overseas. You know, J.D. Vance wrote this book, Hillbilly Elegies, which is really the sociological underpinnings of the Trump revolution. I strongly recommend you read it. It's about his family. Bunch of blue-collar, hard-working folks, right? He'd gone to Yale and it was a Marine Corps officer, infantry officer. It's a great book. But J.D., I was talking to him one time, and he told me about these studies that have been done at MIT and Harvard, where it shows a direct correlation between the factories that left, the workers left behind, and the opioid addiction that started. You guys, I don't need to come here and preach to y'all. You know it. We have a culture and a civilization that's dying in front of us. It's been bequeathed to us from, 12, 13, 14 generations of Americans on every battlefield they fought for, to hand it down to us, to let it slip away in our generation, in one generation, to let it slip away. If you look at the world today, the world President Trump inherited from all the geniuses that mock and ridicule him on the pages of the Wall Street Journal and the pages of the New York Times and MSNBC and CNN. You know, look what he inherited. We got the Bay of Pigs down in Venezuela, the Cuban Missile Crisis in Korea, and you got Vietnam and Afghanistan. From one part of the world to the next, a crisis. You know, President Trump, in taking action and showing what America First means, America First doesn't mean isolation. Under President Trump, it means engagement with the world when it's in the vital national security interests of the United States. And let's be very specific about that. President Trump went to Riyadh to the Arab Muslim Summit that had 44 nations and gave one of the most magnificent speeches and actually reached out to the Muslim world to, number one, help them and assist them to take care of radical Islamic terror. If President, by the way, in the opposition party media was virtually silent about that speech, right? Virtually crickets about it. There were a couple of stories. If President Obama had given that speech, they would have given him his second Nobel Prize. Look what's happened since then. The situation in Qatar, which is all about cutting off the financing to the Muslim Brotherhood. And look at what's happened in the last couple of weeks, where the House of Saudi Arabia has been accused for many, many years of having certain elements of it finance the exporting of radical Islamic terror. You're actually seeing for the first time action being taken. And why is that? Because Donald Trump made as a campaign promise to annihilate the caliphate of ISIS. People forget. People forget. In 2014, the caliphate had 8 million people under rule. They had tax revenues. They had oil fields, right? They were recruiting nonstop from Europe and the United States. And Donald J. Trump made a promise to the American people: I will destroy the caliphate of ISIS. And within 9 months of his administration, in Mosul and Raqqa and other cities, he destroyed it. Excuse me. On Morning Joe, they tell me he was just taking President Obama's plan and just seeing it through and just overseeing it. I'll give President Obama his due, but I just don't remember a lot of annihilation of ISIS going on in his watch. The other situation he's had to handle is North Korea and China. You know, Brexit, the situation in London, you know, Europe, where they they exit the EU in 2016. Brexit and 2016 are inextricably linked, okay? That's why we set up Breitbart London. I think Raheem Kassam is here too if you hadn't been kicked out, our editor from Breitbart London. Because we saw that Europe and the United Kingdom were a canary in the mine shaft for the United States, that this party called UKIP was like a more professional Tea Party. And we wanted to be on the ground to see what evolved there. And we kind of figured out that Brexit would one day come. And we had tremendous coverage, wall-to-wall coverage. We took our radio show over to London. And it was really a canary in the mine shaft. It taught us a lot about what was going to happen in the United States. Because the thing that connects Brexit in 2016 is China. It's the exporting of Chinese deflation and the exporting of Chinese excess capacity that has destroyed the Midland heartland of the United Kingdom, its industrial base, and the upper Midwest of the United States. It's very simple. Here's where the jobs went. They went to China. Now, the political elites and the Republican establishment is as guilty as the Democrats have said for years, as China gets wealthier, as they get wealthier, they become a liberal democracy and a free market capitalist society. That's just dead wrong. And that's not a small mistake. That's a huge mistake. They are a Confucian, mercantilist dictatorship that sees us as an enemy to be defeated. President Xi gave a 3.5-hour speech 10 days ago. 3.5 hours. And I recommend everybody in this room get it. It's 65 pages long. You ought to read every line of it. Because there's not one wasted sentence in the entire thing. In 3.5 hours, he lays out the case why they won and we lost. And if you think that the world's going to be a safer place with China as a rising power to the United States, you got another thing coming. Their relationship with Iran and Pakistan and Turkey is what is driving much of the tumult in the Gulf right now. President Trump inherited all that. And he's promised the American people and committed to the American people that he's going to get trade deals with Japan. He's going to get a new trade deal with Korea. He's going to get a trade deal with China. He's going to get a redo of NAFTA and maybe make it so that Mexico can't game the system so much. And so maybe more jobs are up here in Michigan, back and forth between Canada. President Trump's committed to that. And President Trump's doing it. But inside Washington, D.C., and we call it the swamp, but it's not a cute thing to talk about. I mean, we joke about it. But it is a lethal system. It's a business model where a certain select group enrich themselves and their countrymen are left behind. And what Donald Trump's entire campaign was about was to give voice to the voiceless. To look at working men and women, to be able to look working men and women in the eye and let them know that he is fighting for them and he's fighting for them every day. Now, he's had some victories and he's had some defeats in the 9-10 months he's been in office. Most of the defeats, and one of the reasons I stepped out of the White House, I said it, I was going to take on the Republican establishment. Most of the defeats are because the Republican establishment cannot execute on the plan. The congressman was I think, right to the point. The House of Representatives, has it's 180 bills, but they've had some tough bills there that if Mitch McConnell just allowed to have votes in the Senate, that folks like John Tester and Clara McCaskill and Joe Donnelly and Heidi Heitkamp and others would have a lot tougher time in 2018. Okay? Now, Mitch McConnell, all the newspapers and all the websites are saying, Mitch McConnell, Bannon's picking on him, but Mitch McConnell's doing a better job. He's getting more judges done. They're working 6 days a week. They're working through Thanksgiving. He passed the budget. They're quick stepping the tax bill. Well, folks, that happened because we dropped the hammer on him. They only understand one thing. You cannot be nice to these guys. You have to drop the hammer. That's what he understands. God bless you. 2018 is fast approaching, and I mean like today. If you have to understand something, if we're going to take our country back, a lot of people have talked about it tonight. I know it's the reason that y'all in the back supported Donald Trump. You want to take your country back and make it the country it used to be. They're not going to give you your country back. You're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to take it back. And what that means is that for every day like November 8th of 2016, as much as we like to commemorate it and have fond memories of it and tell stories about it, my war stories will get a lot better about that in years to come, trust me. But you have to understand it's an everyday thing, that the Alabama primary and the Virginia governor's election and the Alabama runoff with the Democrat, with Judge Moore in 2018. This is going to come down to people that oppose us are hardworking folks. You saw that in Virginia. This is going to get down to one thing. Who can work harder? Who is more dedicated? Who is more focused? We understand one thing now. In the digital age, the analog means more. It means everything. It's more important. And what do I mean by that? In today's political landscape, authenticity of candidate is everything. They don't need to be, you want a Donald J. Trump. You want a Judge Moore. You want a Congressman Mitchell, right? You don't need guys groomed, men and women groomed from 7 years old with a briefcase and a blazer and a khaki pants. I don't have a problem with that, and there's some mix in that. We're a coalition. They're good folks. But you give me an authentic character, you give big, actionable ideas, and I mean actionable, things that be put to work today, with an emboldened grassroots movement. And the money doesn't mean that much, because the money's just used for 30-second TV spots. We proved in Alabama where Mitch McConnell dropped $32 million on Judge Moore, and it was not to debate the issues. It's exactly what Hillary Clinton did to Donald Trump. It was, I think she spent $750 million in commercials. I remember the number of the $2.2 billion they raised or something, some crazy number. In Alabama, it's the politics of personal destruction, right? Is to destroy them as people, because they're trying to send a signal. They're trying to send a signal when they try to destroy Donald Trump and they try to destroy Judge Moore. And that signal is that anybody that will stand up and defend you all will be destroyed. Because they're not just trying to shut up Donald Trump, they're trying to shut you up, right? They understand that in Macomb County, true power lies, right? This is why do you think they're here? Why do you think the Financial Times of London and the Wall Street Journal, why do you think they care about this dinner? Why do you think they care about what happened in Michigan? You know why? Because you guys have the power. The only thing you have to understand is how to use it. And on November 8th, you did use it. You didn't listen to the mainstream media. You didn't listen to the spin. You didn't listen to all the attack ads. You went to the ballot box and you voted. And you saved the country. It's the reason I had to come here tonight. There are 3 or 4 counties in this country that turned it all around. And you guys are one of them. That also puts a big responsibility on you all, right? You know, Macomb County's got to lead the way. It's got to lead the way in 18. It's got to lead the way in 20. We got to get bigger. We got to get smarter. We got to get tougher. The hard work, have you seen in the first 10 months, the hard work's only started. The permanent political class in Washington, D.C. is not going to sit there and tell Donald Trump, oh, yeah, Yeah, the guys in Macomb County, they want their country back. We think we'll give it to them back. No, they're going to have to fight for it. And the hard work's still ahead of us. You know, I met a gentleman tonight in the photo line, and he thanked me for talking about a topic I talk about every now and again, about historical turnings. You know, I'm a big believer in the cycles of history, in that America has had three great turnings, three great big movements in its history that's kind of driven us up and up and up. The Revolution, the Civil War, and the Great Depression and World War II. And in this theory of history, when you study it, these things happen about every 80 to 100 years. Well, we're in the fourth turning of American history. You can tell it's starting. I don't know if the date will be the financial collapse, or the date will be, 9/11, or the date will be the Iraq War, or the date will be President Xi's speech. But we're in the middle of a fourth turning. And we've got about 10, 15, 20 years to work through this. And one side or the other, at the end of the day, is going to win. Either the progressive left or Donald Trump Republicans. Now, being a betting man, I like my odds being on your side of the football. Because you represent the decency, grit, determination of what's made America great. America's land, if you've had a chance to go out throughout the world, when you go across our country, it is absolutely stunning. The resources we have, the land is magnificent. But it's not the land that makes it special. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and Hamilton's, Report on Manufacturers, all those great founding documents that we revere and help set this country up in a way unique in human history, they're not even what sets us unique. All the wealth and capital we've been able to preserve, and we have, the hundreds of trillions of dollars, right? And the natural resources, that's not it. It's the American people. You go back and study history. The working men and women of this country have done more to free more people, to bring more prosperity, to bring more peace than any set of people in the history of the human race. And that puts a huge burden on your shoulders and your children's shoulders of why any time you could have been born, you've been born in this time. And that you could do anything with your time or your money. You've chosen to do this. The only way we're going to win this, is if you keep your shoulder to the wheel. I would love to come here and say we got a magic wand and we can pat you on the head, it's all going to be fine. It's not going to be fine. Every day is going to be a struggle, and we're going to have some dark days in front of us. We're going to have some defeats in front of us. But if we keep at this, if we keep at the program that President Trump laid out for us, and if we help him in Washington, D.C., and throughout the states, and in places like Macomb County, there are going to be better days than bad days, and the sunlit uplands are going to be ahead. I want to thank you for having me tonight. It's you guys that really won this great victory and saved the United States of America. Thank you.